So, hi Janine, thank you very much for this interview. So let me ask you some questions.
Well, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, Romy.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
very lucky.
Thank you very much. We are very lucky because we had you in JUCONI since which year?
2005.
2005, and you were in the first conference with us also.
I've been in all the conferences. Lucky me for that.
So you have been a part of the JUCONI conference for a quite long, as you said, since the first in 2010. So what has changed? What have you taken from the different conferences?
Well, the conferences have always just fed me, energized me, and they do that for hundreds of people.
Yes.
And that's something that you can feel from the moment you walk into the conference, how people are getting connected with each other, getting new ideas, applying new thoughts about their work. And one change that I've noticed over the 5 different conferences is that over time, JUCONI has brought in much more of their own work, which I think is a really good thing. Like I remember last year, each of the teams that worked in El Programa, which is the frontline work out in the homes working with families, they each presented aspects of their work so that people could really begin to understand how they might apply it in their own organizations. And I had the sense with Allison that at the beginning of the first conference, she's like, well, we don't want to like privilege our information and want to make room for other people. And yet people were so wanting that information. I remember the first conference or two, almost all the questions when there'd be any time for questions after a presentation were about how to apply these ideas. So I think that that's been a wonderful change, and it's a change that you can also see reflected in JUCONI presenting their book this year, their manual of the whole theory and methodology of the intervention model that they have, because that's also another way of offering that to people. And something else that for me has changed over time is that, because I remember, I think it was the second Congreso that, word went out, you must have something interactive in your workshop, and please think about how do we work together with these ideas rather than some kind of more formal pedagogy. And I think that's been another terrific change to have interactive learning kinds of environment. And I also feel like it leads us in the direction of thinking as well for all the many people who come here to this Congreso from so many different countries and different organizations. What are other ways we might even open up to having more information about what they're doing? And them sharing some of that, whether it's through what I talked about in the ponencia yesterday, like some kind of an organizational fair where people, have pictures of the work they're doing, they have some of the written material that they use within their organization, or pamphlets that they might use to talk about what they do.
So you mean we can add this kind of work in next conferences?
Well, that's a thought. Or have a pre-conference day where people can do something.
This year we
that.
We had something like
that.
The foro,
I heard about that. And was that open to any of the participants for this conference? Oh, okay, that's great.
But they were the organizations that were presenting were prepared before. So not all the people were presenting, but all the people were talking about the practices. So it was very rich.
Yeah, so maybe something like that in the conference. Or going even a little further, we used to at my university have what we call the participants conference. And you could not come unless you participated in some way to share something about your work.
That sounds very, very empowered and empowered. It's okay. To empower people to come and to give them the opportunity to show what they do, because all of us here we are doing some good for people also.
Right. And I was just talking out here in the sweet sunshine of Puebla.
Yeah. A little hot.
Well, for me it's very nice because
Yeah.
we have snow and icy
yeah.
rain in Massachusetts now where I live. But I was just talking with a group of mothers who, you know, after the earthquake,
Yes.
Allie and Eric and Isabel,
Yes.
different people that work with JUCONI,
Yes.
were working with them to give support to the trauma that happened with the earthquake. And now they've organized, you know, and there were like 10 of them.
Yes.
They're organizing all these workshops for
Yes.
children. They're here attending the conference.
Yeah.
And they were showing me pictures and photos of,
Yes.
of some of their work. And I said, you really need to present this next
Yes.
year.
Yes.
At the least having all the pictures up on a big, you know, stand like this with some description underneath.
Yes.
Because there's so many rich things that are happening in this whole field of working with, you know, marginalized populations.
Yes.
And it's just, there's a way in which you get hope and inspiration
Yes.
from seeing.
Yes, and they feel they can do many things for their communities. They feel empowered to do that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Talking about communities and families, I want to ask you about the family work at home. Which advantages do you find in this kind of work?
So there's many psychological and relational possibilities that happen when we're doing therapeutic work or support work of any kind in the home. And this is at the heart of the JUCONI model. And when we enter as helpers into somebody else's home, we have to enter into their rhythm,
Yes.
into their day-to-day interactions. We also get the chance to see the kind of attunement that
Yes.
there is between people within that
Yes.
family. And yet the family has some control over, you know,
Yeah.
the situation, which is
happening there.
different if they've come to some office somewhere for a family session.
Yes.
First of all, it takes time and money
Yes.
to do that. It's a more sterile environment. Most therapists' offices
Yes.
don't have enough in them.
Yes.
And it also means that they're sort of having to enter into a new space that somebody
Yes.
else controls.
Yes. They don't have the power in that place.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's many ways in which we can come in and learn things. So I'll never forget the time I went with one of the educator therapists from JUCONI to a house, and I saw out in the yard all these piñatas in different stages of being made. And this is one of the ways the family supported itself, was
Yes.
to make them and go and sell them in the streets. And there was we went in, they had a session, the educator therapist with the family, and I was observing. And the father had a kind of difficult relationship with the two older sons. And we started talking about how the piñatas are something that are closed but have some very special things within them.
Yes.
And how we as people, we have our own experiences, some of which are very special within us,
Yeah.
but they're closed within us. And what happens when you open a piñata or we open ourselves and we start to share some of this. And there was a whole metaphor that could be
Yes.
developed around piñatas and the
Yeah.
work of making them
Yes.
that allowed this family, especially the father and the two sons, to begin to talk.
Yeah, and
in
they
a-
find the richness in their activities also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Each other.
And he actually said later, you know, it was working with my sons, with the piñatas, with thinking about what's, you know, so rich inside of us.
Yes.
That helped me to talk with them differently. So when we go into homes, we get all kinds of information.
Yeah.
You can see a family altar that then can be used and adapted in some way if you're working with trauma or losses. And JUCONI also can insert some of the methodology and materials that they developed, like the thermometer,
Yes.
which is taking people's temperatures around emotions and understanding how to create safety plans so there's not violence in the home, and people are not getting heated up to the place where there's a threat of violence. So you'll see up on the wall, the thermometer from JUCONI on the wall, or you'll see the list of, here's the rules that we've created in this family that we want to be able to respect and honor. And so, some of the rules are like, listening to each other, making room for each other, being aware that people are different ages and have different needs.
Yes.
So you can create therapeutic space within a house, which is an interesting thing because you may be in a space where some things that have happened that are very difficult. And so how do you create healing space within a space where people might have some triggers around past experiences that were hard?
Yeah, but even physically, we can, the present, what I knew about what educators are doing in families, because I'm not a family educator, but I am learning about the work also, is that their only presence help family to move the things in the space.
Right, and create a special therapeutic space, exactly, to mark that this is a protected time and space, and they do many things around making it safe for people. And yet, when you can then have therapeutic interventions that provide some changes within that space, it's almost like healing not just the individuals, but the space.
The space also,
as well.
Cleaning the space.
Yeah.
In not only in the physical sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you can't do that in an office.
Yes.
So and also
That's
when
right.
we enter into people's homes, we're entering into a community.
Yes.
And so that also gives us the opportunity to see what other resources might be there in the community, pull in other resources such as neighbors who are important supports, say to a single parent family, for example, or we find out some things that are happening in the school where, okay, there's some violence in the school, they're still using some physical punishment, so then that means we need to be aware of that and find what resources we can to go into the schools and work with the teachers around changing some of those punishment strategies. So there's or finding out where there's a group in a church that might be helpful to somebody who's having problems with alcohol. So there's ways in which we also can connect the family in the community, or connect our organization within the community differently. Also. And the community also, I've heard so many stories from educators, therapists about JUCONI families who recommended another family to JUCONI because they had a good experience, and they think, well, maybe you would be able to get some of the help that you need. And so there's ways in which if you're known in the community, that also helps everyone, not only your clients, but maybe other new clients to come to you. Yeah.
So, because I wanted to ask only about the disadvantages, or not disadvantages, but you talked yesterday about that the difficult situations about around the work, the family work at home.
Yeah,
also.
there are some pitfalls or some practicalities.
Yes.
And they can sometimes be both a pitfall and something that's helpful. Yeah. So, for example, you have a neighbor who's very curious and is looking into an open window or knocking on the door and wanting to come in. That can be disruptive, but at the same time you find out, this family has some connections within the neighborhood that maybe we can use in some way. Or the water truck comes, when I was in Guayaquil, where JUCONI Ecuador is, and the water truck came and it comes once a week, and that's the family's only source of water. You have to stop the session. Yeah. But you also can find out what kind of relationship does the person who drives the water truck have with the family. You have to be aware of things like the phone, the television, because in creating this protected time and
Yeah.
space, you can't have too many distractions like
Yeah.
that, because it really disrupts people's
Yeah.
flow and the fluidity that you need to really
Yes.
get into some things more deeply. So you have to be cognizant, and thoughtful about that, and work out with the families.
Yes.
We're going to have some rules here about not
Yeah.
turning on the TV and not pulling out our cell
Yes.
phones or whatever.
And I've heard about that, and I saw also in the in JUCONI families that there is a moment the family is waiting for us coming, and they respect the rules, and they wait the educators with the house prepared.
Yes.
Even if they don't have a chair, they put rocks or whatever they have.
A blanket on
Yeah.
the floor to sit.
Yes.
And, and they talk about the work that they've done to prepare the space. And a lot of times it's, it can be a full day.
Yes.
Because they're living in small spaces and they have to reorganize those spaces
Yes.
in order to make room to create
Yeah.
this therapeutic space.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that in and of itself also tells you something about the family's relationship to each
Yeah.
other, like who is organizing the space
Yeah.
and why, and
Yeah.
you can learn a lot
Yeah.
from that as well. So, I mean, for me, it's been since really since 2001 when I started working with JUCONI Ecuador, but then 2005 with JUCONI here in Mexico. It's just been a continuous learning experience, because I have so much respect for the work that you all do.
Thank you, Janine.
I
Thank
do.
you very much.
I've learned so much, and you're such a learning organization. You make it possible for anybody who comes into it to learn with you.
Thank you
So
very much.
thank you.
Ya me hiciste llorar.